8 foods that may increase dementia risk. Most people believe dementia is something that simply happens to us as we grow older, an unfortunate roll of the genetic dice with little we can do to influence it. But a growing body of research suggests that what ends up on our dinner plate, day after day, year after year, may play a far larger role in brain health than most of us ever imagined. This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace guidance from a qualified healthcare professional. If you have concerns about your memory, your diet, or your risk factors for cognitive decline, please speak with a doctor or a registered dietitian who knows your personal health history. Here's something that might surprise you. The human brain, despite making up only about 2% of total body weight, uses roughly 20% of the energy the body burns every single day. That means the brain is remarkably sensitive to what fuels it, how steady that fuel supply is, and how much stress, inflammation, or damage accumulates in its delicate tissue over time. Food is not just calories. Food is chemistry, and that chemistry reaches every corner of the body, including the 3 pounds of tissue inside your skull that stores every memory you have ever made. Over the next several minutes, we're going to walk through 8 categories of food that a number of researchers believe may be associated with a higher risk of cognitive decline and dementia over time. Some of these will probably not surprise you at all. Others might catch you completely off guard, especially one item near the middle of this list that shows up in almost every kitchen in America and rarely gets a second thought. Stick around, because understanding why that particular food matters could change the way you think about your next trip to the grocery store. Before we get into the list, it helps to understand the big picture. Dementia is not a single disease. It's an umbrella term for a decline in memory, thinking, and reasoning severe enough to interfere with daily life, and Alzheimer's disease is the most common form. Researchers have spent decades trying to understand why some people develop these conditions and others don't. And while genetics and age are significant factors that we cannot change, lifestyle factors, including diet, appear to be modifiable pieces of the puzzle. The foods we're about to discuss are generally believed to contribute through a few overlapping pathways: chronic inflammation, damage to blood vessels that feed the brain, disruption of healthy blood sugar levels, and oxidative stress, which is essentially wear and tear caused by unstable molecules attacking healthy cells. Keep those 4 ideas in mind as we go, because you'll start to notice them showing up again and again. It also helps to understand just how gradual this process tends to be. Cognitive decline related to diet doesn't typically happen overnight, and it rarely announces itself with an obvious symptom in the moment. Instead, researchers describe it as a slow accumulation, damage that builds quietly across years and even decades before it becomes noticeable in daily life. This is part of why diet is such an interesting area of study. Unlike a genetic risk factor, which a person is simply born with, dietary patterns are something we choose, meal by meal, day by day, and small adjustments made consistently over time may carry a meaningful cumulative effect, whether that effect turns out to be protective or harmful. One more thing worth mentioning before we begin. Much of the research in this field relies on what scientists call observational studies, meaning researchers track large groups of people over time and look for patterns between what they eat and what happens to their health later on. This kind of research is incredibly valuable, but it comes with limitations. It can reveal associations, meaning 2 things tend to occur together without necessarily proving that one directly causes the other. Reputable researchers are careful to acknowledge this distinction, and so are we. With that context in mind, let's walk through the list. Number 1. Processed red meats. Bacon, sausage, hot dogs, and deli meats have earned a permanent spot on breakfast plates and lunch sandwiches across the country, but a number of long-term studies have raised concerns about their impact on brain health. These meats are typically high in saturated fat and often contain preservatives such as nitrates and nitrites, compounds that some researchers believe may contribute to inflammation and oxidative stress in the body. Chronic, low-grade inflammation over many years is one of the pathways scientists believe could be associated with the buildup of certain proteins in the brain linked to Alzheimer's disease. Consider someone like Robert, a 71-year-old retired mechanic who grew up in a household where bacon and eggs were a non-negotiable morning ritual. For most of his life, Robert never gave it a second thought. It wasn't until a routine checkup revealed elevated markers of inflammation that his doctor gently suggested he look at his overall dietary pattern, not just his cholesterol numbers. Stories like Robert's are common, and they illustrate an important point. It's rarely one meal or one food that determines outcomes. It's the pattern repeated over decades that may quietly shape long-term brain health. Some observational research has also connected diets high in processed meat with a modestly increased risk of cognitive decline, though scientists are careful to note that correlation is not the same as causation, and more research is still needed to fully understand the mechanisms involved. Still, many nutrition experts suggest that limiting processed meats and choosing leaner, less processed protein sources more often may be a reasonable step for those looking to support long-term brain health. Number 2, sugary drinks and sodas. Sweetened beverages, including regular soda, sweetened iced teas, and many popular energy drinks, deliver a rapid surge of sugar into the bloodstream with almost none of the fiber or nutrients that might slow that absorption down. Over time, frequent spikes in blood sugar may be associated with insulin resistance, a condition in which the body's cells become less responsive to insulin, the hormone responsible for moving sugar out of the blood and into cells for energy. Some researchers have gone as far as describing certain forms of cognitive decline as potentially having a metabolic component, sometimes informally referred to in scientific literature as a type of insulin resistance affecting the brain itself. What makes sugary drinks particularly worth discussing is how easy they are to consume without noticing. A can of soda here, a sweetened coffee drink there, and suddenly a person may be taking in far more added sugar than they realize, all while feeling like their overall diet is reasonably balanced. Researchers who study this pattern often point out that liquid sugar tends to be processed differently by the body compared to sugar consumed alongside solid food, potentially leading to sharper spikes in blood glucose. A large long-term study following thousands of adults over several decades found that those who reported drinking sugary beverages more frequently tended to show smaller brain volume and lower scores on certain memory tests years later, compared to those who consumed them less often. While this kind of research cannot prove that soda alone causes these changes, it has encouraged many health professionals to recommend moderation, along with awareness of how quickly these calories can add up across a typical week. Number 3, fried and deep-fried foods. French fries, fried chicken, donuts, and other deep-fried favorites are cooked at high temperatures in oil that is often reused multiple times, a process that can generate compounds associated with inflammation and oxidative stress within the body. These foods also tend to be calorie-dense while offering relatively little nutritional value, which can contribute to weight gain, and over time, conditions such as high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, both of which have been linked in various studies to an increased risk of cognitive decline later in life. Think of Carol, a 68-year-old grandmother who used to treat her grandchildren to fast food every Friday night as a fun family tradition. When her physician discussed her rising blood pressure and cholesterol numbers, Carol was surprised to learn that her weekly treat might be doing more than affecting her waistline. She didn't eliminate Friday nights entirely. Instead, she and her family started experimenting with baked and air-fried alternatives, finding that the tradition could continue in a way that felt gentler on her long-term health. The connection between fried food and brain health appears to run largely through the cardiovascular system. The brain depends on a rich, steady supply of oxygenated blood delivered through a vast network of blood vessels. When those vessels become damaged or narrowed over time, often as a result of high blood pressure or unhealthy cholesterol patterns, the brain may not receive everything it needs to function optimally, which some researchers believe may contribute to a form of dementia known as vascular dementia. This is one of the clearest examples of how heart health and brain health are far more connected than most people assume. Number 4 is refined carbohydrates and white bread. White bread, white rice, and many packaged baked goods made from refined flour have had much of their natural fiber and nutrients stripped away during processing. Without that fiber to slow things down, these carbohydrates tend to break down quickly into sugar once digested, producing blood sugar spikes similar to those caused by sugary drinks. Repeated spikes and crashes throughout the day may place ongoing stress on the body's insulin response, and some researchers believe this pattern, sustained over years, could be associated with changes in brain structure and function. It's worth pausing here to acknowledge that refined carbohydrates are woven deeply into many cultural food traditions and everyday convenience, from a quick sandwich at lunch to pasta at family dinners. The goal of discussing this category is not to suggest these foods must be eliminated entirely, but rather to highlight the value of balance, such as pairing refined carbohydrates with fiber, protein, or healthy fats, or gradually shifting toward whole grain alternatives when practical. Small, sustainable changes tend to be far easier to maintain than dramatic overhauls, and many nutrition professionals emphasize consistency over perfection. Some research has specifically examined whole grains as a protective factor, finding that individuals who consumed more whole grains as part of an overall healthy dietary pattern tended to show better outcomes on measures of cognitive function over time compared to those who consumed mostly refined grains. This doesn't mean whole grains are a guaranteed shield against dementia, but it does suggest that the type of carbohydrate matters just as much as the amount. Number 5, foods high in trans fats. Trans fats, sometimes listed on nutrition labels as partially hydrogenated oils, were once common in margarine, packaged snack foods, and many commercially fried items because they extended shelf life and improved texture. Over the past 2 decades, health authorities in the United States have taken significant steps to reduce trans fats in the food supply, but they can still appear in certain imported products, some baked goods, and select processed snacks, so reading ingredient labels remains a useful habit. Trans fats have been studied extensively for their impact on cardiovascular health, and the findings are fairly consistent. They tend to raise levels of low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, often referred to as the less favorable type of cholesterol, while lowering high-density lipoprotein cholesterol, the more favorable type. This combination may contribute to the buildup of fatty deposits within artery walls, a process called atherosclerosis, which can restrict blood flow throughout the body, including to the brain. One long-running study that measured trans fat levels in participants' blood found that those with higher levels appeared to have a greater risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's disease during the follow-up period, even after accounting for other health factors. What makes trans fats particularly worth highlighting is that, unlike naturally occurring saturated fat found in foods like meat or dairy, trans fats are largely a product of industrial processing, meaning there is very little nutritional benefit to offset the potential risks. Many nutrition experts consider trans fats one of the more straightforward dietary targets for reduction, since even small amounts appear to carry measurable health implications when consumed regularly over long periods. Number 6, excessive alcohol consumption. A glass of wine with dinner or an occasional drink with friends is a normal part of life for many people, and some research has even suggested that light to moderate consumption may not carry the same risks as heavier drinking patterns. However, when alcohol consumption becomes frequent or heavy over an extended period, it may be associated with a heightened risk of a specific and often underrecognized form of cognitive decline known as alcohol-related dementia, in addition to contributing to broader risks for other forms of dementia. Alcohol is a substance the brain has to work to process, and chronic heavy use may lead to shrinkage in certain brain regions, particularly areas involved in memory and executive function, which includes skills like planning, organizing, and controlling impulses. Heavy alcohol use over time has also been associated with deficiencies in thiamine, also known as vitamin B1, a nutrient essential for healthy brain function. Severe thiamine deficiency related to alcohol use can lead to a serious condition affecting memory and coordination, underscoring how interconnected nutrition and brain health truly are. Consider James, a 63-year-old former salesman whose social calendar had long revolved around after-work drinks and client dinners. For years, he considered this simply part of his professional lifestyle. It wasn't until his adult daughter noticed him repeating stories and struggling to recall recent conversations that the family began looking more closely at the cumulative effect of decades of regular drinking. His experience, while just one story, reflects a pattern that researchers have observed more broadly. The effects of alcohol on the brain often build slowly and quietly, long before they become noticeable to the person experiencing them. Number 7, high-sodium processed foods. Canned soups, frozen dinners, packaged snacks, and many restaurant meals often contain sodium levels far higher than what the body actually needs, sometimes packing an entire day's recommended intake into a single serving. High sodium intake is one of the most well-established contributors to high blood pressure, and high blood pressure, particularly when it persists for years without being managed, is considered one of the more significant risk factors for vascular dementia, a form of cognitive decline caused by reduced blood flow to the brain. The relationship here is fairly direct. Blood vessels, including the small, delicate vessels that supply the brain, can become damaged or stiffened over time when blood pressure remains elevated. This damage may reduce the brain's access to oxygen and nutrients, and in some cases can contribute to small strokes that a person may not even realize occurred, sometimes referred to as silent strokes. Over time, the cumulative effect of this vascular damage may contribute to measurable declines in memory and thinking ability. What makes high sodium intake tricky to manage is that it often hides in foods that don't taste overtly salty, such as bread, cereal, and certain sauces, making it easy to exceed recommended limits without realizing it. Health professionals frequently suggest reading nutrition labels, cooking more meals at home where sodium can be controlled directly, and gradually training the palate to enjoy other flavors such as herbs, citrus, and spices as a way to reduce reliance on salt without sacrificing enjoyment of food. Number 8. Foods high in added sugar, including baked goods and candy. We've already discussed sugary drinks, but added sugar in solid foods, including cookies, cakes, candy, and many breakfast cereals marketed toward children and adults alike, deserves its own dedicated discussion because of how pervasive it has become in the modern American diet. The American Heart Association has noted that the average adult in the United States consumes significantly more added sugar than health guidelines recommend, and much of that sugar arrives through foods that don't necessarily register as sweets in a person's mind, such as flavored yogurt, granola bars, and condiments like ketchup or barbecue sauce. This is the moment we hinted at earlier in the video, because among all the items on this list, added sugar may carry some of the most compelling and consistent research linking it to changes in brain structure over time. Beyond the blood sugar spikes we discussed with sugary drinks, some researchers have proposed that consistently high sugar intake may contribute to the formation of compounds called advanced glycation end products, sometimes abbreviated as AGEs, which form when sugar molecules attach to proteins or fats in the body. These compounds are believed by some scientists to promote inflammation and oxidative stress, the same two pathways we discussed at the very beginning of this video, potentially accelerating the kind of cellular damage associated with cognitive decline. One widely cited study following adults over multiple decades found that those with higher blood sugar levels, even in ranges not high enough to be classified as diabetes, appeared to face a meaningfully greater risk of developing dementia compared to those with lower blood sugar levels, suggesting that the relationship between sugar and brain health may exist along a spectrum rather than a strict threshold. This finding has led many researchers to advocate for viewing blood sugar management as a lifelong practice relevant to brain health, not simply a concern reserved for those already diagnosed with diabetes. Take the story of Linda, a 59-year-old schoolteacher who considered herself a fairly healthy eater, someone who avoided fast food and cooked most of her meals from scratch. What she hadn't fully considered was how much added sugar was hiding in her favorite granola, her salad dressings, and the flavored coffee creamer she used every single morning. After working with a dietitian to identify these hidden sources, Linda was able to make gradual adjustments without feeling deprived, illustrating that awareness, more than restriction, is often the most sustainable first step toward meaningful change. So where does all of this leave us? Across every single item on this list, from processed meats to sugary drinks, from fried foods to hidden sugars, the same underlying themes keep reappearing: inflammation, blood vessel health, blood sugar regulation, and oxidative stress. These aren't 8 separate, unrelated problems. They're 8 different doors leading into the same handful of biological pathways that researchers believe may influence the long-term health of the brain. And that consistency is actually encouraging news, because it means the same general dietary pattern, one built around whole foods, vegetables, healthy fats, lean proteins, and mindful attention to sugar and sodium, may offer protective benefits across multiple pathways at once, rather than requiring 8 completely separate strategies. It's worth remembering that no single food determines anyone's future. Dementia risk is shaped by a complex combination of genetics, age, physical activity, sleep quality, social engagement, cardiovascular health, and yes, diet, all interacting together over the course of a lifetime. The point of this video isn't to create fear around your next meal. It's to offer information that empowers you to make choices with a clearer understanding of what the research currently suggests, while recognizing that science in this area continues to evolve. It's also worth acknowledging that dietary change is rarely as simple as deciding to eat differently. Food carries memory, culture, and comfort. A recipe passed down from a grandmother, a favorite treat tied to childhood, a shared meal that brings a family together after a long week. These things matter and they shouldn't be dismissed in the pursuit of optimal health. Many of the people we mentioned earlier in this video, Robert, Carol, James, and Linda, didn't overhaul their entire way of eating overnight. They made gradual adjustments, guided by conversations with healthcare professionals, and found ways to honor both their health and the parts of food that bring them joy. That balance, rather than strict elimination, tends to be what research suggests is most sustainable over the long run. If there's one statistic worth carrying with you from everything we've covered today, it's this. In that long-term study we mentioned earlier, researchers found that even blood sugar levels within a range not classified as diabetic were associated with a meaningfully increased risk of developing dementia over time. That single finding reframes how many scientists think about prevention, suggesting that brain protective habits may be worth adopting long before any diagnosis of diabetes or prediabetes ever appears on a chart. If you found this video helpful, we would genuinely love to hear from you. Which of these 8 foods surprised you the most? And are there any changes you're already thinking about making in your own kitchen? Leave a comment and let us know, because these conversations often help other viewers who are asking the exact same questions. And if you believe someone in your life, a parent, a spouse, a friend, could benefit from this information, consider sharing this video with them. If you'd like more evidence-based videos like this one exploring the connection between everyday habits and long-term brain health, subscribing helps make sure you don't miss what we cover next. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.